I'm standing at Lee Point, about a quarter of the way along Casuarina Coastal Reserve, as you go from Buffalo Creek at one end to Rapid Creek at the other end. And this area is unusual because there's several types of coastal wetland habitat in close proximity. Over to my left we've got beach and mudflat, and these are protected areas for birds that come here to both feed and nest at particular times of years. Down here to my right we've got a mixture of salt marsh and mangrove. So immediately behind me is salt marsh. This is a relatively unusual type of habitat in tropical Australia, but it's far more common in temperate Australia. And then further behind that we've got here a relatively narrow fringe of mangroves. For much of the Northern Territory, and indeed most of Northern Australia, the coastal profile is very flat, so the mangroves tend to be well developed, with a large mangrove fringe and the other habitats relatively narrow and relatively underdeveloped. Here the land rises a little more rapidly, and behind the narrow fringe of mangroves we get into terrestrial forest. The other unusual thing about this particular area is that it's rapidly being invaded by mangroves. About 3 or 4 species of mangrove are starting to invade this area. In front of me, in the centre of the scene here, is Rhizophorus dioica, the stiltroot mangrove which lines most of Buffalo Creek. And then behind it is a well-developed little bush of Avicennia marina, the grey mangrove, which is common around much of Australia. And this one's quite healthy and growing rapidly. As we move on through this area, there are a few seedlings of Cereops australis. This is the mangrove that is very common in the little fringe of mangroves right next to this patch of salt marsh. So there's quite a few of those. There's another Avicennia marina seedling. And over here is the club mangrove, Aegialatus annulata. And this species is quite common in rather more exposed areas. So it's found growing on rocky shores as well as in well-developed mangrove forests. And as we look further around, you see through this area of salt marsh several well-developed mangrove seedlings and shrubs. The area has eroded and allowed these species to establish.